Hello, my name is Ron Shaw, and this is a short video on how to do basic subnetting. Now, this is going to be a series of videos that will walk you through from a very basic subnetting exercise through to a more complicated, such as subnetting across the octet boundary, subnetting based on host requirements. Now, this basic subnetting exercise is just going to deal with network requirements. Now, as we can see in here, I'm going to be using the address of 192.168.1.0 with a CIDR notation or prefix notation of 24. Now, our network requirements will be to subnet our network. This network here, I've got two different subnets connected off of my router, or two different networks, and we're going to take this network address here and break it up into two equal portions. Now, we're going to do this by subnetting. Now, before we can do this, there's going to be a couple of rules that I'm going to need to explain to you. Now, the first one is the 2 to the n equals the number of networks required. Now, n being the number of networks. Now, n is the number of bits that we must borrow from the host field. So now, for this case, in order to create two networks, and I will need to borrow one bit, and I'll show you that here in a second. Now, there may be some cases where you'll see 2 to the n minus 2 equals networks. Well, during the old days, we could not use the zero network, or we could not use the broadcast network, or the first or last network. Now, since that was very wasteful, network engineers came up and redesigned the operating systems, or the iOSs, and now we can recover and we're able to get those networks. So for this exercise here, we will be using 2 to the n, and we're going to assume that I can use the first and last available networks in here. Now, first thing we got to do is we're going to have to take our network address up here and break it down. Now, this 24 right here tells me how many bits have been or that are used for network. So if I have 8 bits here, 8 bits here, and 8 bits here to represent these 3 octets. So that's where my 24 bits are coming from. And so these will all be network. Now, the last remaining octet here is my host field. So this is where I'm going to borrow bits from, right here. So with that being said, I'm going to sit there and take that last octet, and I'm going to go ahead and bit it out. So let's go ahead and bit it out. And if you noticed here, I'm not doing very good creating my zeros. So I got 7 here, and now let me put one more in here. Now, I always like to go ahead and put my place values here. So this would be the 1s, this would be the 2, this would be the 4, this would be the 8, this would be the 16, this is the 32, this is the 64, and this is the 128 spot. Now remember, this is the dot. This right here represents this last octet right here. Alright, now from here, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to sit there and draw a line down here, because this line right here is going to represent my 24. So remember, over here I have the 192.168.1, and then this right here represents that last octet right here, bitted out. Now, remember since I've got two networks over here, if you can see here, I've got the network here and then a network here. So we got network 1 and network 2. So what we have to do is figure out how many bits that I must borrow in order to represent those 2 bits. Now, starting from the high order bit here, what 2 to the n power equals 2? Well, we know this equals 1, because 2 to the first power equals 2. So that tells me I must borrow 1 bit from the host field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from my 24, my prefix notation, and I'm going to start here from the high order bit and go in 1 place value. Now, that's because I'm borrowing 1 bit. Now, here, I'm going to set there, and this is now called my subnet field. And this is where I'm going to build my networks from. Now remember, our bits can only be a 0 or 1. So this bit here, I'm going to turn it on, and then I'll put zeros in here. Now, This now becomes my new host field in here. So here's where I'm going to build my networks. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up the value in this octet. So if I add up all the place values in here, 0 plus 0 plus 0, this adds up to a .0, because that's going to be 192.168.1.0. Now the next one I'll add within the octets again. That's 128 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, and so on, as you can see here. Now this will equal 128. Now I have to figure out my new mask, because since we have borrowed bits, I'm going to have to include this now in our prefix notation. So since I borrowed one bit, now our subnet mask or our prefix notation becomes a 25. Now this now breaks out my network IDs. Now, how do I know it's a network ID? Well, when you have all zeros in the host field equals your net ID. Now, if I put all ones in the host field, if I turn all these bits to ones, that's going to denote your broadcast. Will equal your broadcast address. So now up here I can sit there and find out my broadcast. So I'll turn all these on. So it'll be 64 plus 32 plus 16 plus 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1, which is going to equal a 127. So that's going to be my broadcast address for my first network, because this is network 1, this is network 2, the two networks that I created. Now the second one, I have all ones in all 8 places, so this equals a 255. And that's the broadcast address for the second network. Now, my host range will be very easy to figure out. It's going to be 1 greater than this number and 1 less than this broadcast. So, the host range for the first network is 192.168.1.1, and the last available host address is 192.168.1.126. Now, for the second network, it's going to be 1 greater than the net ID, so it'll be a .129. And the last available will be a 254. Now remember, all of these addresses now have a prefix notation of 25. Now I can come here to my router and assign these networks to these particular, or these network IDs to a network. So for network 1, I could sit there and give it the 192.168.1.0 with a prefix of 25. Or that's just another way of saying 255.128. So that's what you would input as your subnet mask on your router, or when you assign the IP address, or on the host in its IP configuration. Now over here I would use the 192.168.1.128 with a 25. Now over here again, I would just, my range would be from 129. I could put maybe the 190.29 address here on the router interface. I could use the .1. Now host on this network would use this as their gateway, 192.168.1.1. Host over here would use 192.168.1.129 as their default gateway. Now by doing this and by breaking these down to subnetting, or breaking them into 2 equal networks, now I can make sure that I don't have an overlap of IP addresses. So when a host over here on network 1 needs to get to here, the router will see that based off of the subnet mask, let's say host number 2 IP address needs to get the host 130 over here, the router will see it, or the host will be able to make a determination, hey, I need to send it to here, because that host is on a different network. Alright, I'd like to thank you for watching this little short video on how to do basic subnetting. Please come back and look at my other videos where I'll show you more dynamic configurations on how to do basic subnetting. Thank you and have a good day.